Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the resignation of Boris Johnson, of course, his stated reasons for doing so, his real reasons for doing so, and how, although in his cultists are claiming that this is temporary, now he's finished. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So this may be the first time Boris Johnson has messed up my schedule, and I don't really mind. I will basically be discussing the issues surrounding Johnson's resignation throughout today, including in the stream this evening, but we'll concentrate on Johnson specifically here. Boris Johnson resigned after receiving a copy of the Privileges Committee findings earlier this week. We can take it as read that he was found guilty, on some level at least, and was facing a suspension of at least 10 days. The report will still be published because it is for Parliament, not Boris Johnson. I do not yet know if we will find out what the punishment was going to be that they would recommend, but I think we probably will. That Johnson waited for days after receiving the committee report is curious. Did it take this long for his publicly funded lawyers to tell him the game was up? Or was he hanging on just long enough to make sure his honours list made it through mostly intact? I don't know. But it's clear that he didn't fancy letting the process conclude properly. He jumped before he was pushed. Johnson resigned, predictably citing a witch hunt. He blamed the Labour-led Privileges Committee for forcing him out. Now, this is untrue on both counts. First, the committee was chaired by a Labour MP, yes, but there is no leadership structure within the committee. They're all MPs. All of the members have to agree with the proceedings. All of them have an equal say on conclusions. The chair is just the chair, not the leader. The committee had a majority of Tory MPs, so it was essentially a Tory-led committee. It's also untrue to say that they forced him out. The committee carried out an investigation on the order of all MPs. Remember, not a single MP voted against the investigation, not even Boris Johnson himself. The punishment which they recommend is just that. It's a recommendation. It's a suggestion. If, as Johnson and his cronies allege, there was anything wrong with the way the investigation was carried out, MPs can simply say, well, this isn't right, and they vote down the suggested punishment. Easy. The Conservatives have a majority of MPs. So they not only have a majority of the committee, they've got a majority of the House of Commons. If they feel that they can justify voting the punishment down on the basis that the Tory-led inquiry was a witch hunt or a kangaroo court, then they could have done so. Johnson knew that they would not have done so and so resigned. And even if he felt that treacherous Tory MPs would not block the punishment for some unspecified reasons, even that doesn't force him out. He would be recalled by his own constituents, not MPs. He would then be able to submit himself to the judgment of all of his constituents in a Tory constituency. Johnson would have lost. As I said yesterday before the resignation, there was no way that Johnson would stand in that by-election. I didn't know he was going to resign before at least the findings had been made known, but I knew he wasn't going to stand in that by-election because he would certainly, not almost certainly, certainly lose. But he will later on claim that he would have won it. That is guaranteed. Johnson and his allies claim that he is a wildly popular politician. He is not. He is actually deeply unpopular. This is why he was deposed. Johnson and his cult are complaining about anti-democratic moves against him. If he loves democracy so much, why doesn't he submit to it? Let the parliamentary process run its course and then stand in the by-election. Let me tell you something. If Boris Johnson won the by-election, that would be a powerful statement that he retains at least some public support. Why not do that? It would be democratic and enhance his image. It's a no-brainer. Unless, of course, he thinks he'd lose. There's no other reason for resigning and going to his Oxfordshire manor to carry on with his memoirs. Memoirs which will also, no doubt, be a spiteful fiction of the sort of toddler would write about not being allowed the chocolate bar at the supermarket. You know, I and others said in 2019 the Conservatives would regret making Boris Johnson their leader. Just as with Brexit, they went ahead with it for short-term gain. But the damage that their cowardice has caused will stretch very far into the future. And unlike with much of the damage caused by Conservative governments, this one will hurt them as well. It may even be that Johnson's damage to the Conservative Party outlasts the damage to the country. We can only hope. Tory MPs have been publicly attacking the Privileges Committee in the wake of this resignation. They are literally attacking the integrity of the Parliament of which they are supposed to be a controlling part. It is funny to think how Brexit went from we should give our Parliament more power to our Parliament is an enemy of the people so seamlessly. But this is a sign that Tory MPs are going to start attacking themselves. You know, it's clear there's going to be a sort of civil war within the Conservative movement now. But if it were contained within the wider movement, it wouldn't be that damaging. If the parliamentary party divides along Boris Johnson lines, that's more serious. I'll talk more about that later. But if the parliamentary party properly melts down, then a general election much sooner is still on the cards. Although I do remain unconvinced that there are that many Tory MPs willing to go to these lengths for no possible gain. With Johnson gone from Parliament, he can no longer replace Sunak. What's the point? But this is at least the end for Johnson's damage. The effects of his time in office will be felt for many years. It doesn't end now, as I say. But he won't be able to add to that damage. He'll be able to maintain it, but not add to it. Someone asked on Twitter, what was the difference between Donald Trump and Boris Johnson? I said, Trump still has a lot of public support and could well return to power. Notice Trump was impeached twice. And his own side, who were in a position to block the impeachment effectively, or to at least make sure it didn't succeed, did so. And they did that because Trump was seen as still popular with the public. Boris Johnson faced his own effective impeachment, the sort of version we have in this country, and lost because he's not popular. That is the difference. Johnson is not popular with enough of the public to credibly attempt to win an election. He's got a lot of support in a very biased media sphere, which can give the impression that he retains popularity, but he doesn't. It's an illusion. It's an illusion that would have been dispelled if he'd had the courage to fight for his seat in a by-election. But he was never going to do that. He wasn't forced out. He ran away from the challenge. Some were musing on the fact that because Nadine Dorries stepped down before Johnson, they wondered if he was going to do a chicken run to her safe seat instead. Now, two reasons really. The first of which is that her mid-Bedfordshire seat is quite safe. It looks like a safe Tory seat, but it isn't really that safe at the moment. The reason why Sunak blocked Dorries' elevation to the House of Lords, it's not just, along with other MPs, it's not just because he doesn't want a by-election. It's because he's worried about the by-election. After all, a by-election that he wins, I mean, that's a bit of a boost for him. And if he was worried about a by-election with a decent local candidate, he'd be shitting himself if Johnson stood in it. But second, as noted by Chris Bryant, who was the chair of the Privileges Committee, but recused himself from the investigation because he'd been a vocal critic of Boris Johnson, he said the punishment would still stand. If Johnson stands for Mid-Bedfordshire and wins, the punishment would still apply. So he'd become the MP for Mid-Bedfordshire, come back to Parliament, then be instantly suspended and have to be recalled and fight it again. Now, if Johnson wants to stand in the next general election, it's not going to be by getting a by-election before then. It will be by becoming Henley's candidate, as I've said for some months now. He could still lose that in a general election, but it is the safest Tory seat he can reasonably get. Although Sunak, maybe he could block his candidacy. I'm not sure he's got the backbone to do it, but then what does he lose? His supporters throw a strop. They're doing that anyway. Rishi Sunak is almost certainly going to be hiding this weekend. He will need to think very carefully about who he sends out to do the Sunday interview round tomorrow. And whomever he chooses probably wants to think carefully about whether they want to do it. It is possible that no senior minister turns up at all. Wouldn't be the first time this chaotic Tory government has fled to their panic room and bolted the door shut. It's worth bearing in mind, though, at this point, at the point I'm recording it anyway, which for the avoidance of doubt is about, it's just after 10 o'clock on Saturday morning, so I've left it as late as I dare. Rishi Sunak has not said anything about two of his MPs resigning suddenly, one of whom is his former boss. This is yet again another example of Rishi Sunak failing to lead, and others will occupy the vacuum to his cost. It's just another reason why the whole rotten lot needs to go, really, isn't it? Also, there was talk of other Johnson loyalists resigning as well last night. That was possible, I suppose. Or possible they'll announce it. But actually, it wasn't possible for them to resign. See, an MP isn't actually technically allowed to resign at all. We're a very old country, and as a result of that, we've got quite a few archaic little rules, you may have noticed. See, for an MP to resign, they have to be transferred to what is called an office of profit under the Crown while their by-election is arranged. You can't actually resign as an MP. This is the weird procedure for allowing MPs to leave Parliament without a recall or general election, because that's the usual way MPs leave Parliament. They're recalled by their own constituents, or there's a general election which replaces them. They can't actually just resign. So you occupy one of these offices, and then a by-election sorted out, and then that effectively removes you. But there are only 2 of those positions, and they're now going to be occupied by Nadine Dorries and Boris Johnson. Obviously, nobody thought that you would ever have more than 2 MPs trying to resign at the same time. If anyone else tried it, they'd have to be told to wait their turn. Either that, or Parliament would have to create a 3rd such office, or a 4th. Be amusing if another 1 or 2 Johnson loyalists did try and resign. Be just another way in which Boris Johnson breaks our political system, although at least this time in a fairly non-destructive manner. Finally, I will just reiterate that this is the end for Johnson. He might become an MP again. I can't rule that out, of course. But he will never have power. He might chicken run to Henley. He might win the seat in the general election. He'd have a decent chance. Although he may also find that he is actually unpopular enough to lose anything. But he will be on the opposition benches. By the time the Conservatives look like the public might take them seriously again, they will have only achieved that by disowning their Johnsonian past. Boris Johnson is politically finished. He now faces a future of wealth and inflated importance on the speech circuit. Sorry if you thought he might go to prison. It is possible that some criminal activities, some serious ones, come to light later, as they have for the orange one, but I'm not holding my breath. I've said for a long time, the best I could hope for is that his reign of destruction ends sooner rather than later. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. It took too long. But at least he's gone now, if not forgotten. Some are saying he might start a new party. Maybe, but if he thinks it can make money from it, but I'm not convinced. It would seem like too much effort for no chance of political reward for a very lazy man who is worth a lot of money on the speech circuit by claiming to be an election-winning machine. If he forms his own party just to get his arse kicked, Nigel Farage style, every single time, he loses that mystique. So I don't think so. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.